What did you do, Mother? Why would you do this to me?
Brianna, calm down. There are a lot of reporters outside.
How am I supposed to calm down, Ethan? Look at my $20,000 wedding dress. She poured wine on me on purpose. She hates me because I seated her at table 24 beside the trash hallway, right? I did not touch your wine glass, Brianna. You knocked it over yourself while I was bending down to fix the hem of your dress, just as you asked me to. You still dare deny it? You ruined my wedding on purpose, didn't you? You ruined the happiest day of my life, didn't you? Security! Throw this rude, low-class woman out. Through the back door right now. Congratulations, you have chosen a wife who is perfectly worthy of your cowardice. Today, I came here to give you everything, but now I realize you do not have the courage of a man to carry the billion-dollar crest of the Whitaker family.
The trap snaps shut suddenly with a violent force, branches shaking in the background, a sense of impending danger, tracking shot following the hunter's arrogant smirk in the dark forest. The beeping engines of new luxury SUVs kept sounding as backed into parking spaces on the grounds of the five-star St. Regis Atlanta, the center of upper-class Buckhead. One car door after another opened, bringing with them the crisp laughter of gentlemen in expensive tailored suits and ladies in glittering evening gowns heavy with the smell of costly perfume. In the middle of that overwhelming scene, Naomi Whitaker stood quietly in one corner of the outdoor parking lot, where the late fall cold of Georgia was beginning to slip through the skin. She lowered her head slightly, her rough hands smoothing the small wrinkles at the hem of her navy blue silk dress. It was a dress she had cut and sewn herself from silk fabric that cost less than $45 at an old market on the south side of the city. It had no designer label, no Swarovski stones, but every stitch had been shaped with the patience of a single mother. Just as she lifted her worn-cornered faux leather purse onto her shoulder, a tall shadow dropped in front of her. A young white security guard in a neat uniform and ties blocked the walkway leading to the main lobby. He looked from Naomi's pinned-up hair with a few silver strands down to her simple dress, then stopped at her black wedge heels, a style already outdated from last year. He did not bother to give her even a polite smile. His arms folded across his chest and his voice was flat but full of prejudice. "Sorry, Mom. The main entrance tonight is only for guests of the Kensington family wedding. If you're with the late flower delivery team or the kitchen cleanup crew, please go around to the back door near the trash loading area. The service trucks are parked over there." Naomi paused for one beat. She did not get angry and she did not show embarrassment. The deep black eyes of the 58-year-old woman looked straight at the badge on the guard's chest. Then she calmly took a shining gold-embossed invitation from her purse. On it were the words, "The wedding of Ethan Whitaker and Brianna Kensington." She held the invitation out in front of him, her thumb lightly brushing over the name Ethan Whitaker, the only son she had raised alone through night shifts and endless work for the past 20 years. The guard's face changed at once. He stared at the official invitation, then looked again at the black woman standing before him. The arrogance on his face was quickly replaced by an awkward bow. His lips tightened as he stepped back and pointed toward the shining crystal revolving door. I'm sorry. Please come in." Naomi gave a slight nod, a nod so elegant that it made the man in front of her feel ashamed. She said nothing, kept her back straight, and walked through the glass doors into the main lobby. Inside, chamber music from the live band mixed with the fragrance of thousands of white roses imported from Ecuador and arranged along the walkways. The whole hall looked like a crystal palace, where every detail was designed to declare the wealth and power of the Kensington family. At the media flower wall, Brianna Kensington stood at the center, glowing like a queen in her $20,000 Vera Wang wedding gown. She was posing for photos with her close friends, rich young women in champagne-colored dresses as required by the dress code. Brianna smiled brightly, holding a crystal champagne glass, until her eyes moved across the crowd and stopped on Naomi's navy blue dress. The smile on the bride's lips disappeared immediately. Brianna whispered something into her friend's ear, then with quick but dramatic movement, she lifted her gown and walked quickly toward Naomi. The sound of her Louboutin heels clicking on the marble floor was sharp. She did not hug her mother-in-law, and she did not welcome her with a warm greeting. Instead, Brianna stood close to Naomi, using her taller body to block her from the angle of the photographers moving around nearby. Her voice hissed through her teeth, low enough for only the two of them to hear, but heavy with insult. "Mother, why did you come in through this entrance? Didn't I tell Ethan to tell you to use the side entrances for family? The Vogue photographer is about to arrive to capture the VIP guest welcome. This dress you're wearing, what is this? It does not match the champagne color palette I spent 6 months planning. Do you know that one off-tone photo can ruin my entire wedding album on Instagram?" Naomi looked at her future daughter-in-law. Brianna's face was perfectly made up, without a single flaw, but no powder could hide the selfishness and snobbery in her eyes. Naomi smiled slightly, a forgiving smile from someone who had already passed through too many storms in life. She spoke gently. Ethan told me this was a happy day for both of you, and he wanted me in the main hall to witness this moment. I chose the fabric and made this dress myself, Brianna. It is decent and modest. Made it yourself? Brianna let out a dry laugh, her contempt obvious. I knew it. No wonder the silk looked so rough. Mother, this is the St. Regis in Buckhead, not your little sewing shop in the south suburbs. My father's guests tonight are million-dollar real estate investors and state-level politicians. I do not want them thinking my husband's family is so poor that the groom's mother cannot afford a designer outfit. At that moment, a middle-aged woman walked over. It was Eleanor Kensington, Brianna's mother. She wore a golden evening gown, a glittering diamond necklace around her neck, and carried a Chanel clutch in her hand. Eleanor glanced at Naomi's dress, then lifted her chin and spoke in a high, mocking voice full of malice. Oh, Mrs. Whitaker, I thought you weren't coming. I heard the late bus from the suburbs is often delayed, isn't it? And what is that box you're holding? I hope you didn't bring some handmade pottery or old knitted thing from the last century as a wedding gift. We spent more than $200,000 on this wedding. Everything must meet upper-class standards. Naomi looked down at the old mahogany box worn by time that she held against her chest. The box completely contrasted with the luxury around her, but her hands held it tightly, as if it were her most precious treasure. She looked straight into Eleanor's arrogant eyes and spoke slowly, her voice warm but carrying great power. Mrs. Eleanor, this gift may not shine like the diamonds around your neck, but I am certain it is what Ethan and this family will need most in the coming days. Brianna curled her lips, turned away, and waved to a server passing by with a tray of drinks. She said carelessly, "Just put it on the gift table in the corner, Mother. We'll deal with it during cleanup later. I don't have time for old things like that." However, the moment Naomi opened the box slightly to check the item inside before closing it again, a soft but sharp light reflected from inside the wooden box. At that same moment, an older man in an elegant ash-gray suit was walking past on his way to the VIP hall. It was Julian Vance, one of the leading gemstone and antique appraisers in Georgia, and also an honored guest of the Kensington real estate billionaire. Julian accidentally glanced into the narrow opening of the wooden box Naomi was holding. Immediately his steps stopped. His eyes widened in shock, and the cigar in his hand almost fell to the floor. He stared at the special platinum light coming from inside the box, the kind of light that only family treasures with hundreds of years of history could give off. Julian was about to step forward and ask Naomi about it, but at that exact moment, Eleanor Kensington loudly called his name from across the room to introduce him to a major partner. He had to turn away, but his eyes still looked back at Naomi with extreme respect and suspicion. Brianna did not notice that detail at all. She turned to a wedding coordinator in a black vest, pointed at Naomi, and gave a cold order. "Hey, take her to her seat. Make sure exactly the spot I approved on the seating chart this afternoon." The staff member bowed respectfully and gestured for Naomi to follow him. Naomi walked quietly, still holding the wooden box close. They passed the central round tables where signs read VIP Table 1, VIP Table 2, reserved for the bride's family and officials. There, the chairs were covered in silk velvet, and the tables were set with silver cutlery in the finest crystal glasses. But the staff member did not stop there. He kept leading Naomi deeper toward the end of the grand hall, past even the rows for friends and coworkers. The space around them began to darken, and the chamber music became faint. In its place came noise and heat from behind a two-way hinged door. He stopped in front of a small round table with no fresh flowers. On the tabletop, there was only a plastic bottle of water and a few cheap glass cups. The table had been placed directly behind a large concrete column that blocked the entire view of the main stage. It was also right beside the kitchen entrance, where servers constantly pushed carts full of food and dirty dishes in and out, creating an unpleasant clatter. The server looked at the table number, then looked at Naomi with a hint of sympathy, but he still had to do his job. "Mom, this is your seat, table 24. Naomi stood looking at the empty chair hidden behind the hall column. This was the seat given to a mother-in-law on her son's wedding day, a dark corner pushed outside the frame of glory, where they placed her so no camera lens would touch her, so she would not dirty Brianna Kensington's perfect upper-class picture. She sighed softly, did not complain, and slowly pulled out the chair and sat down in lonely silence, while the sound of glasses rising in celebration of the $1 million wedding began echoing through the hall. The loudspeaker suddenly cut through the smooth sound of the chamber band, the huge crystal chandeliers above the saint. Regis Grand Ballroom dimmed at once, giving way to bright spotlights focused completely on the finely carved archway at the central entrance. The host in a tuxedo and bow tie stood straight on the honor stage, his emotional voice carrying through a gold-plated microphone and echoing to all four corners of the room, holding more than 500 guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your eyes toward the main entrance as we welcome the most important figures of tonight. Representing the respected Kensington family in Georgia real estate, Mr. Richard Kensington and Mrs. Eleanor Kensington, and with them, the brightest couple in Atlanta tonight, our groom Ethan Whitaker and our bride Brianna Kensington. Applause erupted loudly, rolling like a tide against the silk-covered walls. Cheers and congratulations came from the front tables, where local politicians, powerful investors, and famous social media influencers were gathered, creating an atmosphere so lively it felt hard to breathe. Richard Kensington entered first, one hand buttoning his expensive Brioni suit jacket, the other raised high to wave at the crowd with the satisfied smile of a man who had just strengthened his social status through a perfect media event. Beside him walked Eleanor, deliberately tilting her head so the diamonds on her necklace could catch the stage lights and send glittering reflections straight into the photographer's lenses. Right behind them, Ethan Whitaker walked with a slightly stiff posture, but his face could not hide his pride. He wore a custom-tailored tuxedo, his hair neatly gelled, one hand tightly holding Brianna's slender fingers. The new bride kept using her other hand to lift the floating train of her Vera Wang dress, her face angled perfectly so the cameras could capture her best profile. They walked along the red carpet through the middle of the hall, receiving handshakes, high fives, and praise from the VIP tables. Ethan kept bowing in thanks. His eyes swept across the front tables, paused briefly at the mayor's table, then smiled proudly. He looked forward at the wealthy faces applauding him and did not turn his head even once toward the far-hidden corner at the back of the hall. Nearly 50 meters away from the bright stage lights, Naomi Whitaker sat alone at table 24. The small round table was tucked behind a large concrete column covered in gray marble. From where she sat, her view was completely blocked. She could only see a small part of Ethan's shoulder as he stepped onto the honor stage through the narrow gap between the column and the wall. This corner of the room had no imported rose arrangements and no warm lighting. It was cold and full of the mixed noises of reality. Right beside Naomi's seat was the two-way hinged door leading directly into the main hotel kitchen. Every few dozen seconds, the door was pushed open hard, making a dry thud. Servers with sweat-covered faces hurried in and out, pushing carts stacked with silver trays full of lobster shells and leftover beef ribs. The clatter of dishes, spoons, knives, and forks drowned out most of the soft music from the live band above. Make way, please." A young server carrying a large tray with 6 glasses of red wine rushed past behind Naomi. The wheel axle of a cleanup cart beside him accidentally slammed into the back of her wooden chair, moving it a short distance and making it scrape across the floor. The plastic water bottle on her table shook hard, tipped to one side, and spilled across the bare wooden tabletop, which did not even have the fine silk tablecloth used on the other tables. The server did not stop, not even to apologize. He only muttered angrily under his breath about why a table had been placed in the way of the service path, then quickly disappeared behind the kitchen door. Naomi quietly used the only thin paper napkin on the table to absorb the spreading water. She did not show irritation or sadness on her face. Her deep black eyes remained calm and fixed toward the stage where her son was cutting the 7-tier wedding cake with Brianna amid the crowd's cheers. She looked at the boy she had once held in her arms on freezing nights in their old brick house, the child who had promised to protect his mother forever after receiving his first paycheck from an architecture internship. Now that child stood in the most luxurious place, wearing the finest clothes, yet the distance between him and her seemed greater than the length of the entire hall. After the cake-cutting ceremony ended, the music faded to make room for free mingling before dinner. Only then did Ethan pull his eyes away from the VIP guests at the front tables. He quickly scanned the hall, searching for the navy blue dress of his mother. When he saw it barely visible behind the large concrete column near the kitchen entrance, the muscles in Ethan's face twitched. Confusion and a little shame flashed through his eyes. He turned and whispered a few words into Brianna's ear, but the new bride only shrugged carelessly while continuing to check the number of viewers watching her wedding live stream on her phone. Ethan hurried down the steps of the stage and went straight toward the back of the hall. The farther he moved from the central area, the faster his steps became, as if he wanted to solve some shameful problem as quickly as possible. When he stood in front of table 24 and saw the water stains on the table and heard the kitchen door slamming open and shut beside it, Ethan swallowed hard, his face clearly awkward. He looked at his mother, who was still sitting with a straight back and unusually calm posture, then pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down. His voice was low, hurried, and full of excuses. "Mom, are you cold sitting here? I'm sorry, there are too many guests tonight. I didn't get a chance to come down and welcome you." Naomi turned to her son. She studied the sharp features of his face, so much like her late husband Samuel's, then gently placed the paper napkin on the table. She did not answer his question about the cold. She only asked one very quiet question that cut straight into his conscience. "Ethan, is this the seat your wife chose for me?" Ethan avoided his mother's eyes. He lowered his head, clasped his hands together, and kept rubbing the hem of his tuxedo jacket with his thumbs. He tried to lower his voice as much as possible, speaking in a pleading tone filled with weakness. "Mom, Brianna actually had a reason for arranging it like this. You can see it yourself. The first 3 rows of tables are all big names in construction, strategic real estate partners of her father, and venture investors from New York. They only talk about the stock market, billion-dollar projects, and complicated business deals. Brianna thought, you wouldn't really fit those conversations. You'll be more comfortable down here with the regular guests without pressure. Please just bear with it a little for me, Mom, okay? This wedding is very important for my future architecture career. The Kensington family can help me get major Buckhead projects that an ordinary architect would never touch in his whole life. Naomi stared at her son. His words were like a needle piercing the pride of a mother, but she did not show the pain. She asked again, her voice still slow and steady in a frightening way. Ethan, do you really think I should sit here beside the trash path and kitchen leftovers just because I do not know how to talk about the Kensington family's billion-dollar projects? That's not what I mean, Mom. Ethan seemed to begin losing patience when his mother did not immediately compromise the way she always had. He frowned, and his voice became sharper. Mom, don't turn a small thing into something huge. It's just a seat. Is it really that important? After tonight, when everything is over, I'll take you to a nice restaurant to make it up to you. But right now, please, for my future, sit here quietly and don't do anything that upsets Brianna or her parents. You know how Brianna is. She cares a lot about appearances in front of the media. Naomi looked straight into the eyes of her son, eyes now full of selfishness and cowardice. In that moment, she realized the child she had raised had truly been blinded by the fake bright light of Buckhead's upper class. He was willing to step on the dignity of the mother who had raised him just to trade it for a ticket into a world he thought was noble. She said nothing else. She only nodded slightly. It was not agreement. It was the closing of a limited trust she had once held. When Ethan saw his mother nod, he let out a breath of relief as if a great burden had lifted. He stood, smoothed his vest, and did not forget to add one more instruction before leaving. Then sit here, Mom. Later, when it's time for the bride's speech, remember to look toward the stage. He turned and walked away, his steps much lighter, quickly blending back into the glittering world above, leaving Naomi sitting in the dark corner of table 24. The sound of dirty dishes being pushed from the kitchen rose again, but Naomi no longer paid attention to it. At that moment, from inside the faux leather purse on her lap, a soft vibration sounded along with the blue glow of a phone screen. Naomi opened the purse and took out her old phone. On the screen, the caller's name appeared clearly: Arthur Vance. This man held the highest key of power to one of the largest trust funds in America, the person who ran the billion-dollar logistics and transportation empire, Whitaker Logistics, stretching across the southern states. He was a figure even Richard Kensington had spent 3 months begging for a 50-minute meeting with, only to be refused every time. Naomi stared at the flashing name on the screen. Her finger paused over the green answer button for 1 second, then she firmly swiped to the red decline button. She did not want any kind of power to interfere with this moment. She wanted to witness for herself the full corruption of the people now standing proudly on that stage. She opened the message app and quickly typed a short line to Arthur Vance. Not yet. Watching Ethan's wedding. Have the cars and legal team ready according to plan. As soon as the message was sent, Naomi put the phone back into her purse. She raised her head, her eyes cold and sharp as she looked toward the main stage. At that moment, the chamber music had completely stopped. The spotlight now focused entirely on Brianna Kensington as she held the microphone and stepped to the center of the honor platform to give the bride's thank you speech. Brianna smiled brightly, her voice sweet but calculated as it rang through the hotel's powerful sound system. Dear honored guests gathered in this room today, this wedding is not only a joyful day for me, it is also proof of the union of the highest values. I want to give my deepest thanks to my parents, Richard and Eleanor Kensington, who built a powerful real estate family and gave me a perfect upper-class education. I would also like to thank the mayor, our strategic partners, and all our friends from Atlanta's elite for taking time out of your precious schedules to celebrate with us. The whole hall fell quiet to listen to the carefully prepared speech of the media-ready bride. Brianna paused briefly. She looked around the room, then deliberately turned her body and directed her gaze toward the hidden corner behind the large concrete column at the back of the room, where table 24 sat in darkness. A meaningful and cruel smile appeared on her lips. Brianna raised her voice, and finally, I want to give the most special thanks to someone sitting at the very end of the hall. That is Mrs. Naomi Whitaker, the mother of our groom, Ethan. We are deeply touched and grateful to know that, in order to be here for our happy day tonight, Mrs. Naomi bravely took a late bus from the poor South Side suburbs all by herself and came here, sitting quietly in that corner to bless her son without asking for any privilege or special treatment from our upper-class family. Her simple presence is truly a memorable low note in our million-dollar wedding. As soon as the speech ended, Brianna lowered her head slightly and placed one hand over her chest in a fake gesture of emotion. The grand ballroom immediately filled with quiet, mocking chuckles. The eyes of hundreds of guests turned toward the back, landing on the concrete column covered in marble. Whispers, pointing fingers, and contemptuous head shakes from ladies in champagne-colored dresses began spreading like a swarm of wasps. "So she came by bus?" a woman at table 10 whispered to the person beside her. "Look at that stiff navy dress. No wonder they seated her beside the kitchen." How embarrassing for the Kensington family to become in-laws with someone like that. Ethan stood beside Brianna on the stage, his face flushed with shame and humiliation. He knew Brianna was deliberately degrading his mother in front of all of Atlanta's upper class to confirm total control in this marriage. But instead of stepping forward and taking the microphone to defend his mother, Ethan chose to stand still. He lowered his head toward the floor, both hands gripping the hem of his tuxedo, pretending he did not hear the mocking laughter surrounding the mother who had sacrificed her whole life for him. He chose cowardly silence to preserve his own fake dignity. At the center of this public humiliation, Naomi Whitaker still sat motionless on the wooden chair beside the kitchen door. The kitchen door still slammed and dirty dishes still clattered beside her ears, but she did not lower her head. She stood up, slowly smoothed the front of her $45 navy dress, and held the old mahogany box tightly in her hands. Her eyes looked straight up at the stage, at Brianna's victorious face and Ethan's cowardly shame. A cold look, sharp as a razor, appeared in the eyes of the Black Widow. She knew the Kensington family's performance had gone too far, and the deep pit they had dug for their own future no longer had a way back. The lights of the St. Regis Atlanta Grand Ballroom reflected in glittering streams over the crystal champagne glasses, but inside the private bridal lounge backstage, the air was thick with calculation. The room was filled with the smell of expensive floral powder. Large gold-framed mirrors reflected designer handbags and jewelry boxes scattered everywhere. Brianna Kensington stood before the largest mirror, both hands loosely resting on her hips, her eyes focused on the train of her $20,000 Vera Wang wedding gown spread across the silk carpet. A soft knock came at the door, 3 even taps. Brianna did not turn her head. She only raised an eyebrow at the reflection in the mirror as the door opened. A 58-year-old black woman walked in with her usual calm posture. Naomi Whitaker still wore the $45 self-made navy blue silk dress, holding the worn, cornered mahogany box in her arms. Her presence in that room full of designer items was like a dark ink mark on the Kensington family's champagne-colored crystal painting. Brianna turned around, the corner of her mouth lifting into a smile with no warmth. She smoothed the thin lace at her wrist and spoke in a steady voice full of command. "Come in, Mother. I've been waiting for you. My bridesmaids and the reporters just went out to the main hall to prepare for dinner. I called you in here because there's something very important I need your help with. You know, this dress train is made with pure silk imported from Italy. It wrinkles and loses its shape very easily whenever I move. My assistants are busy preparing the reception script for my father's real estate shareholders in the main hall." Naomi stopped a few steps from the bride and placed the old wooden box on a small vanity table near the door. Her calm eyes looked at her future daughter-in-law. She did not answer right away. She simply waited to see where the next words would go. Brianna pointed down at the floor where the wedding dress train was spread in uneven folds. Her voice rose a tone, carrying the obvious superiority of a buckhead young lady speaking to a woman considered poor from the south suburbs. "Bend down and fix the folds on the train for me. Make sure you pull each layer of lace straight from the inside, then smooth it clockwise. I don't want to walk onto the main stage and have any photographer capture a wrinkle in my dress. This takes careful hands, and I think a seamstress like you must be very used to these little tasks, right?" Naomi looked at the elegant train of the wedding gown, then looked straight into Brianna's challenging eyes. The room was completely quiet, with only the ticking of the Cartier wall clock and the faint noise from the party hall outside. Without hesitation, without protest, and without showing wounded pride, Naomi slowly lowered one knee onto the velvet carpet. Her rough hands, calloused from years of work, gently lifted the delicate silk train. She carefully smoothed each lace fold, her movements slow and exact, the work of a skilled seamstress. She did it not because she feared the Kensington family status, but because she wanted to complete the final duty of a mother on her son's wedding day, before every mask of falsehood was torn away. Brianna lowered her head and looked at the black mother-in-law kneeling at her feet, clear satisfaction and victory in her eyes. She picked up the red wine glass from the vanity table and gently swirled the blood-colored liquid inside the crystal. Naomi's silence did not stop her. Instead, it fed the desire to humiliate inside a person obsessed with class power. Brianna deliberately shifted her Louboutin heel, placing it very close to where Naomi had lowered her head. "You know, Ethan told me about all those nights you stayed up sewing clothes for people so you could raise him and send him to college," Brianna said casually after taking a sip of wine, her voice full of mockery. "It's such a touching story, but I think from now on you don't need to do that anymore. Once you're part of the Kensington family, you only need to know where your place is and behave properly. Don't bring poverty and South Atlanta backwardness into this space." As soon as those words left her mouth, Brianna slightly curled her lips. Her finger deliberately struck the stem of the red wine glass in her hand. The crystal glass slipped loose and fell straight onto the chest and waist of the pure white wedding gown worth $20,000. The dark red liquid spread like blood, quickly soaking through the expensive silk fabric and turning the perfect wedding gown into a stained mess. Brianna immediately screamed loudly, a sharp, dramatic scream performed perfectly. She did not even look at the stain. Instead, she put both hands to her head, rushed out of the bridal lounge, and ran into the hallway leading directly to the main reception hall, where hundreds of guests were standing and talking before dinner. "Oh my God, what did you do? Mother, why would you do this to me?" Brianna's scream struck the busy party space like lightning. Hundreds of people, from politicians to upper-class ladies, stopped at once and turned toward the backstage hallway. Brianna ran out, fake tears quickly rolling down her cheeks and as in ruining her light makeup. She cried and pointed at the dark red wine stain on the chest of her dress, screaming in pain before the watching crowd. "Mother, I knew you hated me. I knew you were unhappy because I seated you at table 24 behind the column. But I did that for your own good. I didn't want you to feel lost among my father's partners. How could you be so cruel that you would deliberately pour a whole glass of red wine onto my wedding dress right before dinner? You ruined my wedding on purpose, didn't you? You ruined the happiest day of my life, didn't you?" The crowd began to stir fiercely. Whispers and angry pointing fingers turned toward the lounge door where Naomi was stepping out. Eleanor Kensington saw her daughter's ruined dress, and her face turned pale with rage. She rushed forward, held Brianna's shoulders, and looked at the woman across from her with eyes sharp enough to devour her. "Mrs. Whitaker, are you insane? This is a one-of-a-kind designer dress from Paris. Do you know it's worth several years of income from that broken little sewing shop of yours?" "You rude, low-class woman." Naomi Whitaker calmly stepped out of the hallway and stood across from the fury of the Kensington mother and daughter under the surrounding gaze of 500 contemptuous guests. She stood straight, her arms relaxed at her sides, her face showing no fear and no panic. She looked directly into Brianna's eyes, which were filled with hidden triumph, and her voice was warm, clear, and carried through the hall because the acoustic sound system had already been turned on for the dinner music. "I did not touch your wine glass, Brianna. You knocked it over onto your dress yourself while I was bending down to fix the hem, just as you asked me to. You're still denying it?" Brianna screamed, her staged rage reaching the peak of performance. "I saw you hit the glass with your own hand. You hate our family because we are rich. You wanted to humiliate me in front of the media, didn't you?" In the fury she had created in order to completely remove her black mother-in-law from this wedding in her life, Brianna rushed forward one step. She raised her hand and with all her strength delivered a hard slap across Naomi's left cheek. Slap. The dry, sharp sound rang through the lapel microphone Brianna had not yet turned off, blasting straight into the powerful sound system of the St. Regis and shaking through the entire hall with a piercing echo. The huge grand ballroom immediately fell into suffocating silence. Not one whisper, not one movement. 500 people stared at the scene that had just happened. A white upper-class bride had slapped her black mother-in-law in the middle of a 5-star wedding hall. Ethan Whitaker stood not far away beside the table of million-dollar real estate investors. He stared at the clear red mark on his mother's left cheek. His hands trembled. He almost took one step forward, his lips moving as if to call, "Mom," but at that exact moment, the eyes of Richard and Eleanor Kensington swept toward him like a silent warning about his career future and the family's reputation. Ethan froze. He looked at hundreds of camera lenses pointing toward his mother, then at his wife's wine-stained wedding dress. Cowardice won again. Ethan stood still, lowered his head toward the marble floor, and did not dare step forward to protect the woman who had given birth to him. He chose to become part of that cruel, silent crowd. After seeing her daughter act, Eleanor Kensington immediately turned toward the hotel security team, standing at the corners of the hall, and shouted with a voice full of expulsion, "Security! What are you standing there staring for? Throw this rude, violent woman out of the hotel immediately. Do not let her stay here and pollute our wedding space before the reporters from the major papers arrive. Throw her out through the back door." 4 tall security guards in black suits quickly stepped forward and surrounded Naomi. They did not dare use rough force in front of the upper-class crowd, but the arms they raised formed a wall of escort, forcing her to move toward the emergency exit. In the storm of humiliation, Naomi Whitaker did not cry. She did not raise a hand to hold the cheek still burning red from her daughter-in-law's slap. She stood so straight that it was almost shocking. Her self-control and dignity at that moment made the 4 security guards around her unconsciously step back half a pace to keep a respectful distance. She slowly turned, her cold eyes sharp as 2 platinum razor blades, as she looked straight at Brianna, who was pretending to sob beside her mother. That gaze did not hold the hatred of a weak person. It carried the final judgment of someone holding the power of life and death. Then Naomi turned and looked directly at her only son, Ethan, still standing with his head lowered in cowardice among that fake wealthy crowd. She spoke, her voice not trembling. Every word was hard and clear in the dead silence of the St. Regis Hall. Congratulations, Ethan. You have chosen a wife who is perfectly worthy of your cowardice and weakness. Today, I came here to give you everything I had, but now I realize you do not have enough backbone as a man to carry the crest of the Whitaker family. After speaking, Naomi did not bother to look again at the trembling son. She turned and walked away slowly under the escort of 4 security guards, heading straight toward the crystal revolving door and out into the cold Atlanta night. The crystal revolving door of the Regis slowly closed behind Naomi Whitaker, leaving the thin sounds of the $1 million wedding hall behind a thick soundproof barrier. The air outside the edge of Buckhead was much colder at night. A light autumn drizzle began to fall over the smooth concrete, laying a thin film of water across the marble steps leading down to the guest pickup area. Naomi stood still beneath the wide awning. The night wind lifted a few silver strands from her pinned-up hair and brushed against the hem of her $45 navy dress, now damp from the rude collisions inside. On her left cheek, the red mark from Brianna Kensington's slap had begun to swell, burning under the dry cold. But the deep black eyes of the widow held no tears and no wavering. She stood with her back straight, one hand gripping the worn, faux leather purse, waiting in silence like a general watching a battlefield before the first shot. The 4 security guards in black suits followed her out and stood in a line less than 2 meters behind her. The captain pointed toward the walkway leading out to the public bus stop on Peachtree Avenue, his voice openly dismissive. Mom, Mrs. Kensington's order is very clear. You are not allowed to linger at the front of the St. Regis anymore. The reporters' cars and VIP guests are about to leave, and your presence here will block traffic. Please move through the side parking area or go straight out to the main road immediately. Naomi did not turn around and did not bother to answer him. She only looked at the old mechanical watch on her left wrist. Exactly 10:20 p.m. rumble. A low, powerful, unmistakable engine sound suddenly tore through the quiet night of Buckhead. It was not the sharp noise of a sports car. It was a deep, dignified growl from large V12 engines. From behind the curve of the internal road leading to the hotel's main entrance, 5 sharp blue-white laser beams swept across the maple trees, cutting through the falling drizzle. The 4 security guards froze. The captain narrowed his eyes toward the approaching lights. From the darkness, 5 brand-new black Rolls-Royce Phantom 8 extended wheelbase cars, polished so perfectly that the champagne gold coach line along each body still reflected the streetlights, slowly entered in a straight arrow formation. All 5 cars carried special Georgia State VIP registration plates, the kind issued only to corporations with massive budget contributions or financial trusts with systemic influence. The super luxury cars glided over the wet road so smoothly they made almost no sound except the soft grip of tires against brick pavement. Then they all stopped in front of the entrance steps, completely blocking the path of every other vehicle, including Richard Kensington's Link Navigator waiting in the distance. The space outside the St. Regis entrance suddenly fell still. The chamber music drifting out through the openings of the second-floor balcony seemed to be swallowed by the overwhelming arrival of the convoy. Hotel management, including the night general manager in a gray suit, rushed out through the doors in panic. They knew exactly what those Rolls-Royces with those plates meant. This was the convoy of Whitaker Trust, the family trust behind the entire southern logistics system, the hidden power that owned most of the land beneath Atlanta's commercial district. The doors of the first and last Rolls-Royce Phantoms opened at the same time. 4 large, powerful bodyguards in expensive tailored black suits, earpieces in place, stepped out quickly. They did not even look at the hotel guards. They immediately moved into 2 straight lines, forming a perfect security corridor from the center car to the steps where Naomi stood. Then the rear door of the middle Phantom slowly opened wide. An older man stepped out under a large black umbrella held by a guard. He wore an expensive 3-piece tweed suit, his hair neatly combed, and gold-rimmed glasses glittered under the entrance lights. It was Arthur Vance, the chief executive officer of Whitaker Trust, the man American financial media called the Iron Hand of the transport industry. The person Brianna's father had spent the past 3 months begging for a 50-minute meeting with and had received only silence from his secretary. Arthur Vance did not look at the hotel managers approaching him with nervous bows. He held a black alligator leather file, walked firmly up the marble steps, and stopped in front of Naomi, the woman in the cheap navy dress with the red mark still on her face, before the wide-open mouths of the St. Regis management and the security guards who had just insulted her. The billionaire CEO of America slowly lowered his body and bowed his head at a respectful 45-degree angle before Naomi. His voice rang out, steady, clear, and filled with absolute reverence in the rain-soaked air. Chairwoman Whitaker. All legal procedures related to activating and transferring full executive authority over the Whitaker Trust, valued at $1.2 billion, have been completed according to your written sealed order at 9 p.m. The legal team and department directors have fully gathered at headquarters. We have been waiting for you all evening. Naomi lowered her eyes to the leather file Arthur was presenting with both hands. Her face was still calm as the surface of a windless lake. She gently accepted the documents, her voice casual but carrying supreme authority that made the hotel guards behind her unconsciously shake. "You have worked hard, Arthur. It is raining in Atlanta tonight, so the road must have been a little difficult. Serving you is the greatest honor of the Vance family, Chairwoman," Arthur said as he straightened. His eyes moved to the red mark on Naomi's left cheek. His thick eyebrows immediately pulled tight, and a sharp flash of anger appeared behind his glasses. "Your face. What happened inside the hall?" Naomi had not yet answered when the sound of Louboutin heels rapidly striking the tiles came through the revolving door again, along with hurried footsteps. Brianna Kensington and Ethan Whitaker were rushing outside. Behind them came Richard and Eleanor Kensington, along with a few VIP guests from the front tables who had stepped onto the second-floor balcony to watch after noticing the huge movement of the Rolls-Royce convoy below. Brianna, still in her Vergewine wedding dress stained with Ruthbert dark red wine, her makeup faded with irritation because dinner had been interrupted, was about to shout at the guards for allowing strange cars to block the entrance. But when she saw the face of the man standing beside Naomi under the lights, her eyes opened wide in shock. She froze, her breathing became uneven, and both hands gripped her wedding gown as she stammered. Mr. Arthur Vance, the CEO of Whitaker Trust? Oh my God, why are you here at this hour?" Her father, Richard Kensington, had just reached the door. When he saw the logistics tycoon he had been begging day and night to extend his warehouse transportation contracts, Richard's expression changed instantly. A forced, flattering smile appeared on his weathered face, quickly fixed his collar, and hurried forward, stretching out both hands to shake Arthur's. "Mr. Vance, what a great honor for our Kensington family. I had no idea you took the time to attend my daughter's wedding so late tonight. If I had known, I would have personally welcomed you at the gate and taken you to VIP table number 1. Please forgive this late reception." However, Richard's outstretched hands hung in the air. Arthur Vance completely ignored him. His hands remained solemnly at his sides, and his stone-cold eyes stared at the Kensington family as if they were entities that did not exist. Contempt was clear in every muscle of the CEO's face. Seeing Arthur Vance standing so close beside Naomi, Brianna lost control under the mix of rich girl arrogance and jealousy. She pointed at Naomi, her voice high and full of bitterness. "Mr. Vance, there must be some misunderstanding here, right? Why are you standing beside this woman? She is only a poor widow from the south suburbs. She came here on a late bus and just deliberately ruined my wedding dress with red wine. Hotel security just threw her out because of her rude behavior. You are an upper-class gentleman. Please do not let low people like this damage your reputation." Crack. The sound of Arthur Vance tightening his grip on the Mont Blanc fountain pen in his coat pocket could be heard clearly. He slowly turned and faced Brianna Kensington. The gaze behind his gold-rimmed glasses was no longer socially polite. It was sharp, cold, and merciless like a razor about to cut the bloodline of a company. Arthur Vance spoke, each word even but heavy as 1,000 pounds, striking the ears of everyone present at the St. Regis entrance. "Miss Kensington, your intelligence and your arrogance appear to be inversely proportional to the value of the wedding dress you are wearing. The woman standing before me, the woman you just insulted with ignorant language, is Lady Naomi Whitaker, Supreme Chairwoman of the Board, the sole legal owner of Whitaker Trust and the statewide Georgia Logistics Corporation." The entire entrance area of the five-star hotel seemed to fall into a silent explosion. Richard Kensington froze where he stood, his hand still raised from the failed handshake, trembling violently. His face turned from red to gray like a corpse. Eleanor behind him tripped over the hem of her evening gown and staggered backward, her Chanel clutch falling straight into a puddle of rainwater at her feet without her noticing. Brianna's mouth fell open. Her lips trembled. She looked at Naomi, then at Arthur Vance, trying to find some hope that this was only a cruel joke. "No, that can't be. You're lying to protect her, aren't you? Ethan told me his mother only had a small sewing shop in the poor suburbs. How could their family own a billion-dollar corporation? This makes no sense." Arthur Vance lifted the alligator leather file from Naomi's hands and calmly opened the first page. It showed the solid gold-raised seal of the Georgia state government and the governor's signature. He held it directly in front of Richard Kensington, his voice cold as a court order. "Mr. Kensington, as a businessman, I'm sure you recognize the encrypted seal of the Whitaker Family Trust. 20 years ago, after Lady Naomi's widowed husband, Samuel Whitaker, passed away, she placed the entire massive family fortune into anonymous sealed status so she could raise her only son as an ordinary person, away from the toxic attention of the media. And today, your daughter's stupid arrogance forced our chairwoman to sign the order ending that anonymity." Arthur Vance paused for one beat. He stepped forward and stood directly in front of Richard Kensington, his gaze full of class dominance. "The $80 million logistics yard lease and construction material supply chain contract that your real estate company has been begging us to renew tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I officially announce it here. The order to cancel all partner status for Kensington Group was approved by Chairwoman Naomi 30 minutes ago. Starting tomorrow, not one of your trucks will be allowed to enter the Whitaker Trust Port and Warehouse system anywhere in America. Our legal team will also recover all outstanding debts within 48 hours. Prepare your bankruptcy filings, Richard." Thud. Richard Kensington completely collapsed. His knees buckled and both hands grabbed the stone railing of the hotel entrance to keep his heavy body from falling onto the wet ground. Sweat ran down his forehead, mixing with the cold rain. He turned to look at his daughter Brianna with eyes full of hatred and horror, realizing the castle of wealth he had spent his whole life building had been brought down in one night by his daughter's snobbery. At that moment, Ethan Whitaker stood alone in the hallway. His face had lost all color. Arthur Vance's words were like buckets of ice water poured over his head, which had been spinning with fake ambition. The mother he had just forced to sit at table 24 beside the kitchen trash, the mother he had just given up protecting in exchange for a place in the Kensington family, turned out to be the person holding the key to a financial empire 100 times larger than the family he had been bowing to. Ethan trembled and stepped forward, his knees almost giving out, his voice breaking in the rain. Mom, I didn't know. Why did you hide this from me all these years? I'm your son. Oh, Mom, please listen to me explain." Only then did Naomi Whitaker slowly look at her son. Her eyes held no anger and no blame, only a quiet disappointment so deep it was frightening. Her silence was like a life sentence for the betrayal of a spineless son. She did not say a word to him. Turning away was her cruelest disowning. Arthur Vance bent down and picked up the old mahogany box that Naomi had placed on the vanity earlier, which had now been carelessly thrown into a corner of the lobby by a server who thought it was trash. He lifted the box, carefully wiped the rainwater from the worn wooden surface with a handkerchief, and opened it in front of Ethan and Brianna. Under the laser lights of the 5 Rolls-Royces, the item inside the box released a brilliant and sharp platinum glow. It was a solid platinum family crest carved in the form of an eagle spreading its wings, the supreme symbol of power of the Whitaker family, something that any central bank in Switzerland or New York would open its VIP room doors for. Along with the crest was an original ownership certificate stamped in red by the state court, confirming the transfer of inheritance rights to 10% of the original shares of Whitaker Logistics Corporation to Ethan Whitaker on his wedding day. That 10% was worth no less than $120 million in cash, a number that could buy the entire Kensington fortune at its highest point. Ethan stared at the certificate printed with his name and the shining platinum family crest. Late regret and unbearable shame rose up and choked his throat. He lunged forward, trying to reach for the wooden box. "Mom, 10% of the shares. Dad's family crest. That was mine, right, Mom? I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong, Mom." Click. Arthur Vance slammed the box shut before Ethan's fingers could touch it. The old CEO coldly took a gold DuPont lighter from his suit pocket, opened it with a soft metallic ding, and lit a blue flame. Arthur calmly removed the $120 million ownership certificate from the tray and set fire to the corner of the paper right before the desperate eyes of the young couple. The flame quickly swallowed the lines printed with Ethan Whitaker's name, turning the certificate into black ash that drifted and vanished into the Atlanta drizzle. Arthur Vance dropped the last burning piece of paper to the ground, crushed it into black mud under the heel of his polished leather shoe, and spoke like a proclamation from hell. "This gift and the noble Whitaker name itself, you are no longer qualified to receive either of them, Ethan. From this moment on, your name has been completely removed from the family register and from every right of the trust. Enjoy the upper-class marriage you traded your human backbone for." Arthur Vance turned and respectfully opened the rear door of the black Rolls-Royce Phantom 8 for Naomi. The Black Widow stepped into the car with perfect elegance and straight-backed grace. Her $45 navy dress now looked more dignified than the evening gowns of every lady inside the reception hall. The Rolls-Royce convoy slowly began moving. The V-12 engines growled softly once more and disappeared down the internal road shaded by maple trees, leaving behind a ruined scene of collapse. Ethan Whitaker dropped to his knees on the wet concrete, covering his face with both hands and sobbing loudly under the contemptuous silence of the guests watching from the balcony, while Brianna Kensington stood frozen, staring at the wine stain on her dress as it slowly turned black under the heavy rain of the Atlanta night. All false power had been shattered, and the price of foolish arrogance had only officially begun. The tires of the 5 Rolls-Royce Phantom 7is rolled softly across the wet brick in front of the St. Regis, creating a steady, rustling sound that faded deeper into the quiet night of Buckhead. Exhaust from the expensive V-12 engines condensed into thin mist in the cold air, hanging around the bright crystal lights outside the entrance before being blown away by autumn wind. The blue-white laser lights from the convoy slowly disappeared behind the maple trees, leaving the hotel entrance thick with shock. The hotel security guards, who only minutes earlier had shown rude dismissal, now stood pushed to both sides, arms and legs trembling, eyes staring at the wet tire marks as if they had just seen a god walk out of the darkness. Inside the main hall, the glorious atmosphere of the $1 million wedding had completely vanished, replaced by a frightening silence. None of the 500 elite guests of Atlanta were raising glasses anymore. and no one was discussing billion-dollar real estate projects. They stood scattered around the balconies and large glass doors, their eyes fixed on the Kensington family. There was no longer admiration or flattery in those looks. Instead, there was the kind of examination, disdain, and distancing that the upper class shows when they smell a ship about to sink. The phone inside Richard Kensington's suit pocket suddenly vibrated violently, breaking the suffocating stillness outside the entrance. Richard, who was still gripping the stone railing with both hands to keep from collapsing, staggered as he pulled out the phone. The screen displayed the name David Sterling, the chief legal officer and top financial advisor of Kensington Group. His hand shook so badly that it took him 3 tries to answer. He had not yet spoken when a panicked, breathless voice came through the line, the voice of a man who had just watched the floor under his feet collapse completely. "Richard, where are you? What happened at the St. Regis?" At exactly 10:30, Whitaker Trust's automated legal system sent an emergency written notice to the CEO's office. They officially canceled the extension agreement for transportation yards and construction material supply chains for all our Buckhead and Savannah projects. Richard Kensington swallowed with difficulty. His throat was dry as a desert, and his voice came out weak. I know, David. There has been a misunderstanding. I just met Arthur Vance outside the entrance. What misunderstanding? David Sterling almost screamed through the phone, the sound of a desk being hit clearly audible. Do you know the consequences? The moment Whitaker Trust's notice appeared on the interbank system, Wells Fargo and Bank of America immediately activated emergency partner risk clauses. They just froze 3 revolving credit loans worth $45 million that we were supposed to draw on Monday morning. They are demanding that we prove alternative supply sources within 24 hours, or they will begin foreclosure on the collateral, which is all the Phase 2 project land. Our internal shares are being dumped by venture investors on the derivatives market. Richard, who the hell did you offend at Whitaker? The phone slipped from Richard Kensington's powerless fingers and fell straight onto the marble floor with a dry crack, the screen splitting in 2. The once powerful man of Georgia real estate no longer had the strength to pick it up. He turned his bloodshot eyes full of hatred and despair as they stared at his daughter Brianna, standing alone in her Vera Wang wedding dress. Eleanor Kensington beside him had also heard the screaming from the broken phone. Her face, covered in expensive makeup, was now pale and bloodless. She rushed over, grabbed Brianna by both shoulders, and shook her hard again and again, her voice cracking with fear. "Brianna, what have you done? Do you know that your slap just drove this entire family into a dead end? Why were you stupid enough to destroy your father's whole fortune with your own hands over a seating arrangement and a glass of wine? Why?" Brianna Kensington stood frozen, both hands still gripping the part of the wedding dress stained dark red with wine. The arrogant tears from before had now turned into pure horror. She looked at her father gasping for breath, then at her panicked mother, then at the VIP guests at the front tables quietly gathering their bags and leaving the hall through the back exit to avoid media damage. The $1 million wedding she had worked so hard to prepare as a display of upper-class status before all of Atlanta media had now turned into the public funeral of a family. She could not understand how the poor black seamstress from the South Side, the woman she had always despised, the woman seated at table 24 beside the trash path, could change the entire fate of a real estate empire with one short text message. A few steps away, Ethan Whitaker stood like a wax figure in the drizzle that was growing heavier. Arthur Vance's declaration and the flame burning the certificate for 10% of the shares worth $120 million kept replaying in his mind like hammer blows striking his last pride and sanity. $120 million, the platinum crest of the Whitaker family. The ticket into America's true upper class, the thing he had been willing to sell his mother's dignity for and beg to receive, had been inside that old mahogany box all along, and he, through his own cowardice and weakness, had joined the Kensington family in throwing it away like hotel trash. Overwhelming regret rose like fire and burned away all the fake pride of a Buckhead architect. Ethan no longer cared about face. He no longer cared about the contemptuous eyes of 500 guests looking down from the balcony. He rushed down the marble steps, his expensive leather shoes splashing through rain puddles, running madly in the direction Naomi's Rolls-Royce Phantom 8 had just gone. Mom, please stop the car, Mom!" Ethan shouted, his voice broken and choking in the Atlanta night wind. He ran almost 50 meters before the lead car in the Rolls-Royce convoy suddenly slowed and stopped near the curve leading to Peachtree Avenue. The middle car where Naomi was sitting also slowly stopped, its red taillights casting long, painful streaks across the wet road. Ethan ran to the rear door of the Phantom, his knees gave out, and he dropped completely onto the cold concrete road full of mud and rainwater. His custom-tailored tuxedo worth thousands of dollars clung to his skin, soaked with dirty rainwater. He used both hands to pound on the black, bulletproof window of the car door, tears mixing with rain as they ran down his face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong, Mom. Why did you hide this from me all these years? I thought our family was poor. I only wanted to please my wife's family. I wanted a place in Buckhead so I could move up, so you wouldn't have to stay up sewing for people anymore, Mom. I did all of it for our family's future. The electric motor sounded softly as the thick black rear window of the Rolls-Royce slowly lowered halfway. The warm, luxurious interior, filled with the scent of premium leather and sandalwood, appeared in complete contrast to Ethan's cold, dirty misery outside. Naomi Whitaker sat straight on the champagne-colored leather seat of authority, her face calm like a statue carved from quartz. She slowly turned her head, lowering her dirt-black eyes, full of mercy but cold and completely firm, toward her only son. She was not angry. Her voice was still warm and steady, just like when she used to sit beside the old sewing machine in the brick house on the south side. But every word struck Ethan's soul like a sentence nailed into place. Ethan, I hid the Whitaker family fortune, not because I was selfish. I did it because before your father passed away, he told me that the money in this trust was too large. It could feed 10 generations, but it could also rot the backbone of a man if it was handed to a child who had not yet learned what dignity means. I accepted staying up at night sewing clothes for others. I accepted living in the old house for 20 years, just to see whether my son, when facing life's difficulties, could keep the strong spine of a black man carrying the Whitaker name. Naomi paused. She raised her hand and lightly touched her left cheek, where the red swelling from Brianna's slap was still clear. A quiet pain of a mother passed through her eyes, then quickly turned into the firmness of an empire's chairwoman. But tonight, you showed me the answer, Ethan. For a seat at the front tables of Buckhead, for the smile of a spoiled young lady, and for promises of Kensington real estate projects, you were willing to stand still and watch them humiliate your mother. You watched a server slam into my chair. You watched your wife slap me in front of 500 people, and you did not have the courage to step forward and protect me. You betrayed the mother who raised you, and you betrayed the Whitaker family, just to trade for fake acceptance from a class that despises you in its blood. Ethan sobbed, trying to raise his hand to grab the edge of the car door, but Arthur Vance's cold eyes from the front passenger seat, looking through the rearview mirror, made his fingers withdraw in fear. Mom, I know I was wrong. Please give me one more chance. I'll divorce Brianna. I'll come back to the old house with you. I don't need the Kensington money anymore. Mom Naomi Whitaker slowly closed her eyes for 1 second and let out a decisive sigh. When she opened them again, every final emotional thread seemed to have been completely cut. She looked at her son, her voice cold as winter ice. Your chance ended the moment you turned your back and walked away from table 24, Ethan. Starting tomorrow, you are no longer a member of the Whitaker family. Go and fully enjoy the upper-class life beside the wife you chose with your own hands. Naomi pressed the control button. The black window of the Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly rose, completely separating the two worlds. The car began moving, its V12 engine growling softly once more before accelerating. The 5 Rolls-Royce Phantoms followed one another onto Peachtree Avenue, quickly blending their red taillights into the busy traffic of Atlanta night. Behind them, under the drizzle that was falling harder, a ruined and humiliating scene of collapse stood clearly beneath the streetlights. Ethan Whitaker knelt completely on the dirty, wet concrete, covering his face with both hands and sobbing like an abandoned child, his cries swallowed by car horns and falling rain. Not far away, Brianna Kensington staggered down the steps, her $20,000 Vera Wang wedding dress now covered in mud at the hem, the red wine stain on the chest turning into a dark black smear. She looked at her father's broken phone on the floor, then at the VIP guest cars rushing out of the hotel grounds as if fleeing a disease. Brianna screamed and cried in helpless rage, realizing that the fame and upper-class status she had always used to step on others had now become a joke for all of Atlanta. The powerful Kensington family had completely collapsed on the very night of their own wedding because of the arrogant trap they had set with their own hands. Inside the Rolls-Royce Phantom 8, moving smoothly along the main road toward Atlanta's financial district, the space was perfectly quiet and warm. Naomi Whitaker leaned back against the leather seat, her calm eyes looking out at the red and blue neon lights of the city sliding across the rain-covered window. On the widow's face, there was no hatred, no regret, and no cheap joy of victory from a sudden reversal. There was only supreme peace and self-possession in every line of her face. She gently opened the old mahogany box resting on her lap and looked at the platinum eagle family crest shining under the car's ceiling light. The value and dignity of a mother never lies in whom her child marries, and it does not lie in whether that child stands in the most luxurious places of society. It lies in the fact that she lived a life full of honor, and when necessary, she was ready to teach her son the final lesson, the most expensive lesson about the price of betrayal and cowardice before life. The Rolls-Royce continued racing into the night, leaving behind all the fake glitter of Buckhead, heading toward a future where true dignity had been returned to its rightful noble place.